My name is Richard White, for those of you that have not attended one of my sessions before. I've been doing Sage for, well, a little over 30 years. Um, I have clients in 47 states, every Canadian province, and 87 other countries. So I do get around. Uh, Today, we're going to talk about how to do a bank reconciliation within the Sage 300. So again, feel free to put anything in the chat window if you have any questions. But on your Sage, if you go to Common Services, you then see something called Bank Services. So just a little bit of housekeeping here. If I go into banks itself and look at the way that your banks are set up, I'll just take a look at one bank we have here. This is a sample company, and this is the City Commercial Bank. So here we have the last maintained date, we have a transit number, we have a bank account number, we have our next deposit slip, our error write-off spread, and days before eligible for clearing. So you can set that to whatever you want. You can keep it short, and it'll just keep the transactions up to that date. Under the GL account number, this is where we tie in the GL account numbers for the bank account itself, for write-offs, and for any charges. Under the address, this is not mandatory, but you can populate all of the information for your banking address. Now, check stocks. Check stocks are, oops, sorry, I'm trying to make it a little bigger. There are many different scenarios you can do here. So here we have an AP check, which is an AP laser check stock. The next available check number that you're going to use, the stock type, which is a combined check and advice, and this is the Sage check form and how many advice lines per page. So this particular check that you're looking at here is like a stub check and a stub. You could tear off the bottom portion and retain it for your information, and the top two would be folded and emailed out to your vendor. Unless you're using EFT, the EFT product itself will look after emailing of the remittance. So again, you can have as many of these as you want. If you're also doing payroll from this bank account as well, you'd want to set up a check stock for payroll as well. Okay. And then taxes, any taxes that you have to set up for this bank. And then you have a balance tab. It's also going to tell you the last reconciliation fiscal year and period that you've run. All right, under bank setup, under options, here you can have it set up a default bank code so that you do not have to populate it each and every time you create a receipt batch or a payment batch. Check for reconciliation in future periods. You could have a warning, none, or you could have it create an error message. You can sort deposit details by date or receipt number, and transaction options as well. Default distribution code and default GL account. Not mandatory, but you have the ability of populating this. It really comes in handy when you only have one bank account. And then documents. This is the document numbering, where it's going to tell you the next bank entry, the length, of the detail document type, the prefix, and the next available number. And then under bank transfers, they're 22 characters long. The prefix is TF, and the next number is going to be 3. All right. Distribution codes. Distribution codes can be configured. So, for example, bank charges. So here, if we set up a bank charge, we can actually use a distribution code called BC, bank charges, and it will automatically populate that GL account for us. So you can have as many distribution codes as you want. Then you have something called distribution sets. A distribution set is a multiple of distribution codes. So, for example, if I was entering a rent transaction in my bank, it would hit my bank charges, my accounts payable, my interest, and bank errors. Okay. I can show you how we can use distribution codes and distribution sets later. Then we have credit card types, where you have American Express, Diners, MasterCard. You basically build whatever credit card types that you're using. And then we have GL integration. Now, like every module within Sage, you can create a GL batch during posting or on request using the GL icon. So what that means is if I'm doing transactions in my bank rec, when I post my transaction, it will create the GL batch for me. If I don't want it to do that, I physically have to go into periodic processing and tell the bank rec module to create the GL batch for me when I'm ready. Now, the only issue with that is it's going to take, let's say you only did this monthly. It's going to take all the transactions you did through the month and put them all into one batch. So reconciliation would be a little harder to try and tie back to the original transaction. So I always recommend during posting here, when creating the new batch, the GL batch, do you want to add to an existing open batch that's already in your GL, create a new batch, or create and post the new batch? So in my case, I'm just creating a new batch. I'm not automatically posting it, but you can. And that by setting this create and post a new batch, it really prevents people from opening a bank transaction batch in the GL and changing anything within that batch. So it's a better audit trail that you can't change something coming from a sub module. And then here, consolidate GL batches. You can consolidate by account and fiscal period, consolidate by account, fiscal period, and source, or do not consolidate. Now, I'm an absolute firm believer in not consolidating, because if you in fact do consolidate the transactions, you lose the drill down capability within the general ledger. Now, under transactions, this is where you can stipulate what you want to go from the bank module to your GL. So for example, if I was doing bank entries, so on my bank entry in the GL entry description, I'm going to pass over the entry description. here in my detail reference, I could pass over anything I want. On my GL detail description, again, I could put the, again, anything I want for the entry description. And then my detail comment, I could put the entry description again. So you can pick and choose what you want to go to the entry within the GL. Okay. All right. So I mentioned distribution codes and distribution sets. If I was to go into a bank transaction and do a bank entry. Now, in doing a bank entry, the first thing I want to do is I want to pick the bank that I'm going to deal with. And I'm going to put in some sort of a description. So this is just a test entry. Here I have withdrawals or deposits. So I'm going to say this is a withdrawal. The type of withdrawal, was it a check, credit card, cash, or other? So I'll just say cash, the date of the transaction. Now, you'll notice here, I have distribution set or I have distribution code. If I hit the magnifying glass and pick the rent, it is going to populate all of those entries that we've seen in the distribution set. So it's picking all of these distribution codes. I'm going to close this. I'm not going to save it. I'm going to come back in, do the same type of transaction. But this time, I'm going to use a distribution code. So now I see bank charges. And it's going to pull up the GL account for me by just entering the distribution code of BC. So here I could say it's $125 bank fee. It's a withdrawal, it's cash, it came out of my account. Now this is one way of entering a transaction. Now I'll just hit add. It's going to give me that transaction number 3, which I said was the next number. Now I can post this, or I could just move on by hitting the green plus button and post these entries later. So just remember, I'm not going to post this, and we will see this entry when we come to do our bank rec. All right. So under the bank setup, we've covered everything. Let's actually go in and do a bank reconciliation now. So if I go into bank transactions and I go into reconcile statement, I'm going to start by putting in my bank, and then I'm going to put in the date of the statement that I've received from my bank. Now, you're not going to see Sage transactions that are newer than this date you've entered. You're only going to see up to that date. Now here, if you had the bank statement in your hand, you would enter the ending balance. Now, I don't have one in my hand, so I'm going to circle back to this just a little bit later. You would then hit the calculate button, and you will see it is calculating your outstanding deposits and your outstanding withdrawals. So now, one more thing on the statement date. You can do a bank statement daily, weekly, monthly. But what you absolutely must remember is you cannot go back in time. Once you post this date, you can only move forward. So if you're going to do one on a daily basis, you do one each day. If you're going to do it weekly, you do one each week. Now, when I hit the reconciliation tab, what I see here are all the checks, and I've started clearing the checks that I see on my statement. To do so, you simply click in the reconciled field. You can double click or you can hit the space bar to add the X. So we're going to clear whatever is on our bank statement. Now, let's talk about this for a minute. If I have a lot of transactions, I can display only outstanding. So all the ones that I've reconciled have disappeared off the screen, or I can see only the ones that I've reconciled. So if you have a lot of transactions and you've only cleared so many checks, this might be the quickest way of seeing it so that you can make sure that you haven't missed anything. I'm just going to go back to all. Now, under the transaction type, I can do withdrawals, which are only the withdrawals, and or I can do deposits, which are your deposits only. Okay, I'll go back to all. Now, one of the nice things about the reconciliation is if I highlight this dollar amount, I can actually hit the drill down button, which will take me back to the original source entry. I also see who did this entry and what documents were paid. So if I have any questions, I know who I can go and ask, right? And if this check cleared, I would simply hit the cleared button. Same as my deposits. If I highlight a deposit and I hit the drill down button, I see the deposits that make up this total deposit. I can also hit document on the one that's highlighted, and it will take me back to the, again, original source entry. So I can see what invoice this person paid. All right. All right. Now, I'm looking at my bank statement. And what I want to do here is I just want to copy this date. Okay, so I'm looking at my bank statement. I've cleared everything, but I noticed on the bank statement there was a $200 bank fee. So I do not have to leave this screen to go into bank entries. I can do it right here by hitting the bank entry button, which opens my bank entry screen. So here I could say this is a bank charge. I'm going to use the date. It's a withdrawal, it's cash. I'll use the bank charge and I'm going to make it $200. Now I can hit add, which is going to give me entry number 4. Now I can post this, or I can just hit close. When I come back to my summary page, you see that I have a bank entry here that has not been posted. So if you ever see something here, just simply hit the go button and it's going to show you that you can post these transactions right now. So I'm just going to hit post, and it's going to create the batch in the GL for entry number 4 because it wasn't posted. Now we can see that $200 disappeared. I'm also going to see that that $200 is now sitting as a, what was the date? There it is right there. So there is my transaction 04 that I did to record my bank fee. So of course, I would clear this as well. Make sense? Any questions so far? All right. I'm going to hit save. Then I'm going to hit summary. So I've cleared all my transactions that are on my bank statement. Now I come back to my summary and I can see that I have to put in an opening balance here from my bank statement. And I put in my bank balance off of the statement, and we can see that this is now fully cleared or reconciled. This button that you see here for the book balance, if I hit that button, I see what's on my GL and what's in my book balance as of the last reconciliation. Okay, and those two want to tie back. Now here I could say that this is the bank rec, and I'll hit save. All right. The next step is extremely important. If you go to your bank transaction reports, you want to print your bank reconciliation. I'm just going to do it for the one account and hit print. If you do not do this, you will not be able to reprint this report after it's posted. So I'm going to hit print. So this is the reconciliation page that we just did. And then this is now going to list all of the transactions that are still outstanding. All right. So you can see there's 7 pages. So this is going to tell me what was cleared, right? And what's still outstanding. So print this, save it. Then what we would do is we would go back to post our reconciliation. So here, if I go to post reconciliation, I'm just going to do my one bank. And I'm going to hit post. So this is now clearing. I got an error. It's sample database. Something about payroll. I probably don't have the Canadian payroll activated. But now, if you were to try and go back and reprint that report, the reconciliation status, it's not going to be there. Sorry, the bank rec. Okay. Any questions so far? Oh, this is too easy. All right, so let's look at a few other than reconciling. Now, there are some other alternatives. You see here that you have an import OFX statement. This is rather old technology. And it needs to be an OFX level 2 report that can come from your bank. But basically what happens is if you can get an OFX format level 2, you would come in here, you would pick your bank and you would tell it where you saved that file. But again, this is very old technology. They've also added this reconcile e-statements, where again, if you have the ability to import the OFX, you would be able to see the transactions here and start clearing your bank, right? Or you can connect to a bank feed and download your e-transactions. There is another way of doing bank reconciliations. Unfortunately, I don't think we're going to have time today to walk you through it. But with the addition of another product, there's something called Rec Express, where Rec Express will actually import your bank files and match by check and amount or reference an amount, and it will do your bank reconciliations for you. You also have the ability to add additional charges. So we could cover that product on another day. Okay, the next is bank transfers. Excuse me. Bank transfers is where you're moving money from one bank to another. So let's say you have your main operating account, and then perhaps you have a payroll account where you only keep money in that account to cover your payroll. All right, so from here, I'm going to transfer into my payroll banking, I don't know, 25,000. I'm also going to use that older date, so we'll see it. Now, so what I'm doing is I am taking, okay. Sorry, someone just posted something here. It says, I have a few very old checks that won't clear for some reason in Sage. Any ideas? Yes, it happens. If you cannot clear the checks, you can have your business partner or someone like myself, a Sage business partner, take a look at your data on the SQL server, and we could force clear those checks so that they will not show up on your statement again. It has no effect on your GL. All we do is go in through the back door into the database, change a setting on that check number to be cleared as opposed to outstanding. So it's your business partner should do it for you, or someone that really understands the business logic and how to manipulate the SQL data. Do not attempt it yourself, please. Okay, so here I'm going to, from our main bank account, I'm going to take $25,000 and I'm going to move it into this bank account. Again, back on that date. And I'm just going to simply hit post. Now, what this did for us, okay. Now, I'm sorry, I forgot to add, if there was any fees, like if CCB charged $15 for a bank fee, I could add the $15 here and it would make a transaction for me as well. All right. So let's just go back into our reconcile statements. And if we call up our CCB account, you're going to see here I have a check coming out of $25,000. And it was transferred to the FC Bank. So I have a withdrawal of 25,000. Now, if I go to the FC Bank, I put in that date. And I come here, I'm actually going to see it automatically created the deposit for me. Okay. So again, transaction number 3, it's a transfer number 3, depositing $25,000. Okay. All right, there was another question. Yes. When the webinar is complete, would like to know how to get historical data for the first time. A reconciliation bank services module has never been used and entries have been done by GL entry only. Bank rec has been done manually by Excel spreadsheets. We will be starting this for August 1st. Okay. So, yes, we will definitely cover that for you. All right. So we did bank transfers, bank entries we did earlier, right? So if I just call one up, there's the one we did for the $125 bank fee. All right. Post entries. So remember I said when we do a bank entry, we can hit save, but then we could also hit post. If there are any bank entries that you have saved and not posted, when you come in here, you can post all of the entries. Now, this realizes that entry 3 was not posted. So I'm just simply going to hit post. And it's going to post that entry 3 for me. Okay, we did the post reconciliation, transaction history inquiry, where you can come in here and we could look at transactions for certain dates. And it's going to call up absolutely every accounts payable payment that we've done since the beginning of time, because I didn't put any dates. But if I was to put a date here, these are the transactions that it found on those dates. Now you'll notice I'm in accounts payable. I can go to accounts receivable. I can do the same. So every receipt that's ever come in, Can more than one person make bank entries at the same time? Absolutely. Then you can see payroll. If I wanted to see any payroll transactions, there's my payrolls. Any bank services transactions. Excuse me. And then any others, which could be credit card, stuff like that. All right. Now, reverse transactions. All right. How do I reverse a transaction within Sage? So I'm going to call up my bank. I'm going to go to accounts payable. And I'm going to look at every check that was ever written. So this one is check number 1 that was paid to this vendor. Okay. If I was to hit post and I go back to this vendor in accounts payable, it will reverse the payment in the GL in the bank rec module, and it will actually set up the payable on that Chloride Systems account for you to pay again, providing it was an invoice in accounts payable that was entered in an invoice batch, paid in a payment batch. It will set up the invoice for you to pay again. If you created a miscellaneous payment, it will not set up the payable again. It will simply credit the expense that was used in the miscellaneous payment and debit the bank. Okay. So just keep that in mind. Same as accounts receivable. If a accounts receivable customer, let's say this guy here, here's all his payments, and this payment came back from the bank because it was returned NSF. Okay. It will set up the invoice against this client's account for you to select when they pay it again, providing it was done through the AR invoice, the AR receipt batch. If it was a miscellaneous receipt, it will solely credit the bank and debit the revenue account you used. Okay. Make sense? You can also reverse payroll transactions. So you can pick this payroll transaction. Now, the one thing you want to be cautious of, though, is it tells you the date that this payment was, or this paycheck was done. You want to probably go back to that period of time to reverse that check. You want those two dates to pretty much be the same, because what's going to happen is this check would remain in an outstanding status until it reaches this period. Then it will disappear off of your outstanding checks. So if you're going to reverse it, make sure these two dates are the same. It's just going to make life much, much easier for you. Okay. Okay, somebody said, if your payroll is outsourced, and it recorded in the bank. How does it get recorded in the bank rec instead of going through the GL? Is there a way I can import and export bank transactions instead of a GL batch? Okay, yes, absolutely. We have written literally hundreds of tools where you can take your outsourced file, and we build you a little icon here, right? So here we could build a little icon here that says import transactions. So as long as the format of the outsourced payroll doesn't change, you basically hit the button and it would import all of the transactions for your individuals, and it would list the bank transactions as if you'd basically written a check, right? Then the offset account could be whatever is coming over from your payroll. So for example, I use an outsourced payroll, and I tell the outsourced payroll, I want a list of all the check numbers, the employees' names, and the amounts. That file we could import into the bank transaction entries. On the GL side, you tell the payroll company that you want it to hit a payroll cash clearing account. So when we create the import, we will offset the payroll cash clearing account. So after your payroll is done, you post in the GL. After you've imported your bank entries, the offsetting account will be to the payroll clearing. And when those two transactions are posted, your payroll clearing account should be zero. I hope that's not too confusing. Okay. All right. So it says, if you reverse same payment date, then the prior bank rec outstanding list will be off. These reports will already be printed and you cannot reprint them. I would normally reverse on the day and then reconcile the outstanding items. Yeah, and that's fine. You got to remember the data I'm playing with here has about 3 or 4 years worth of transactions. So I just happened to pick a transaction that was really old, right? But if I knew, let's say an example, I went into accounts payable, I entered an invoice, I paid the invoice, and then realized, oh my God, somebody put it to the wrong vendor, and we cut the check. I have the check in my hand. I'm not going to send it out. So I would reverse that check immediately. So the two dates are going to be pretty much the same. However, if it's an old, a year old, you probably want to backdate it. If not, it's just going to stay outstanding. So it's not, if you're aware that you're reversing something, I mean, what's typical? After 6 months, a check is considered stale dated, right? So if you're going to backdate something and you've already done 5 months worth of reconciliations, that's not an issue. Reverse it under today's date, because when you do the bank rec for today's date, it's not going to be there any longer. Not a big deal. All right. Okay, so what I'd like to do now is talk really quickly about building a brand new account, right? So we all know that through accounts payable and accounts receivable, when you pay money or receive money, it automatically hits your bank, right? So if I come back to this bank, even though I've never done a bank reconciliation, there is going to be transactions in here. So you draw a line in the sand and you say, okay, for the last year that we've been using Sage, all these transactions are in here, right? But now, starting next month, I want to start using the BankRec module properly. What I would do is I would come in here before the first day of next month, and I would reconcile everything. I would make it so that there's 0 in this account. Then the day that you want to start using the BankRec module, you would need to have a list of A, the opening balance, B, the outstanding deposits, and C, the outstanding withdrawals. What you would do, okay, now there's a couple of ways we can do this. I could leave in here the transactions that are truly outstanding. Clear absolutely everything else. So now I've already got my deposits that are outstanding on the day that I want to use the BankRec module. I could also leave the outstanding checks, right? So that's option 1. Option 2, remove everything that's in the BankRec module. When you come into the new bank, you will hit a bank entry and you will enter each outstanding deposit, each outstanding check, and then you would also do one additional entry. You would record the opening balance, and the offset account would be to the general ledger account. So when you post this, every single transaction that you put in, outstanding checks, outstanding deposits, and your opening balance will all go against your GL bank account. Because when the GL batch gets created, it's going to be net 0 because you already have your bank balance in the GL. Does that make sense? So you're sort of cheating the system just to get the opening balances. All right, another question. How do GL entries for bank withdrawals and receipts shown in BankRec when you do first? How do GL entries for bank withdrawals and receipts show in BankRec when you do first reconciliation? I'm not sure I follow. How do the GL entries for bank withdrawals or show? Are we talking about in the GL itself? Like I did some transactions here. And if I go to the GL transactions, I go to my batch list, I'm going to see BK entries. So these are all the entries I've done today, right? Manual entries have been done by GL batch entry. Ah, okay. Okay, very good question. The BankRec module has absolutely no idea what your bank GL balance is in Sage. In saying that, if I was to come in here and hit new, and I'll just do a test batch. All right. I am going to I'm going to do this on the old date, okay? Because when we go into our bank rec, all right, so here's my CCB account, right? 1020. Now check this out. I'm going to put in 2,500,000. And I'll pick any other account just to make this entry. Okay, so I'm in the general ledger, okay? There's my 1020, which is my CCB bank module account. I'm going to hit add. I'm going to hit close, and I'm going to post this batch. So my GL has an extra $2.5 million in it. Let's go look at my bank rec module. Remember, I used the old date. Now, if I come down here, I don't see that $2,500,000 in here, do I? So this is telling me that if you post directly in the general ledger, your bank rec module has absolutely no idea that transaction took place. So how would I make this bank rec see the 2,500,000? I would do this. Bank entry. To record GL posting. Right? I'm going to use the old date so we can go back to see it. What GL account am I going to use here? Well, I'm going to use 1020. And what am I going to put in? I'm going to do a deposit. I forgot to change the deposit. So how am I going to fix this? I'm going to do a bank entry. I'm going to do a deposit of cash. I'm going to use 1020. Here's my 2,500,000, correct? All right, I'll hit add and I'll hit post. Now let's go look at our bank rec. I'm just going to hit calculate here. And if I come in here, why is it 0? What did I do wrong? Let me look at my GL batch. So if I go down to my BK entry here, you can see I am now debiting and crediting. Yeah, it was the wrong date. Thanks. I am debiting and crediting because it happened on 2023. If I would have put the old date, it would have been better. I'm debiting and crediting the same GL account. So what effect did that have on my GL? Absolutely 0. But I put the transaction in the bank rec module, which netted out to 0, but it's recorded now in my bank rec module. Does that make sense? let me just do this again. I'll use the right date this time. So 10/20 was our GL account. Add, post. So if I go to my reconcile statements, call up my bank, hit calculate, reconciliation. There's my deposit of the 25 million, right? Or sorry, 2,500,000. The GL entry it created, put in my balance as a debit and a credit to the right date. Okay. And nothing happened on the GL side. All I did was record it in my bank rec module.